morning. I'll call the meeting to order. Healthy Growth Advisory Committee, June 2nd, 2021. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for today's agenda? All right, seeing, hearing none. Approval of the minutes. I believe they were circulated, the minutes of May 5th, 2021. They were circulated with the agenda. Any discussion, concerns, issues with those? All right. Consensus, seeing none, we'll accept those minutes. And the agenda, there's Eric. And today's agenda for approval. Hello, Eric, welcome. Any issues with the agenda as it's set out? All right, again, seeing none, we'll take it as given. Takes us to our action item for today, barriers and incentives to building attainable housing. Who wants to lead this off? Maybe Kelly, just to introduce it, and we go from there.
Yeah, sure, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, I invited some developers here. 3 of them develop rental units in Center Wellington, and the 4th, Skyline, and I invited them as well because they manage rental housing in Center Wellington, and they build in other municipalities. So what I thought would be very important is for us, the whole committee, to hear firsthand from our developers in this business before we go too far down the path of identifying changes that we can make. I think it's important to hear from people who know this industry. So I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to speak today. I've talked to them about coming and answering basically one question. What top 3 things do you think we should focus on that would encourage you to build more rental units in Center Wellington? So very clear. I wanted to give them all an opportunity to speak to answering that question. I also know that Skyline has just recently done a presentation to I think it's Collingwood, and they wanted to make sure that they had that opportunity to present that to this group here. The topic is exactly the same, and I think that's probably a really good use of our time as a committee. So that's the purpose of having these 4 guests here today. I also invited Yana from the county. And Yana's you've met her already, and she heads up our economic development department, and the county is using the economic development department to pursue its attainable and affordable housing strategy. So want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that we don't have to replicate a meeting like this at the county level as well. I want us to all hear the same story today. So that was the purpose of having them in front of the committee today. And I just wanted to thank them before they started. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is very valuable for us, and I know it takes out some time in your schedules. So we really do appreciate you coming and spending some time and helping us to move forward with real action to increase the supply of attainable housing, especially rentals in Center Wellington. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, gentlemen, all 4 of you. I don't know if you've discussed amongst yourself. Do you have a particular idea of who's going first and second and so on? Or do you just want me to pick you?
Picking and choosing is good.
You're willing to let me pick and choose. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just do them in the order I see them on my screen here. I think the first one up is Greg Jones. Hi, Greg. Just want to just introduce yourself and your connection with all this, and then we await to hear what you have to say.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Greg Jones. I work with Skyline. About 2 years ago, we started a development company, SkyDev, looking at building new rental apartments across Ontario. We're working on about 3,000 new rental apartments. Well, I'll just back up a bit. I have a presentation to share with you today. I'll just share that now. I guess my history, I did the University of Guelph Housing and Real Estate Management program while working with Skyline in the early years. Did a Master's of Land Use Planning while working full-time. I built condominiums for Lantera developments in Toronto. Worked with First Gulf building First Gulf, building rental housing and office, and then Cadillac Fairview doing Western Canada. And I did my land use planning was also at Guelph and the rural studies program, and then did an MBA in finance and organizational studies after that. So I'm kind of a nerd, bear with me. I'll share my screen here. So, don't want to go right to the end here. Hold on. I'm going to start my show. Okay, is the bandwidth okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So those of you that may not be familiar with the Skyline group of companies, we have a retail REIT, an apartment REIT, a commercial REIT, and a clean energy fund. We primarily talk about the apartment REIT, which is our largest fund. We're about 20,000 rental apartments in 57 communities in 8 provinces. Our home base is Guelph. I think many of you are familiar with Jason Ashdown and some of the other co-founders trying to own and manage rental properties and do good in our community. As a quick summary of who Skyline is here, the Clean Energy Fund owns a portfolio of solar. And we really have a long-term view on ownership and development where we're building buildings, you know, unlike a condo developer where you're building to sell, we're building to own it for decades. So those sustainable technologies make sense financially for us. So who is SkyDev? Started about 2 years ago. We are now in 8 communities doing 3,000 rental apartments. Show you a couple that are underway. Welland's 98 apartments on a property we own there. It's under construction. Tecumseh, Ontario, next to Windsor, 142 apartments, central amenity building. Chatham, Ontario, 138 rental units. These are all under construction, shovels in the ground. Gravenhurst is launching this month, 220 rental apartments. And that's just in that Sobeys Plaza on the way into town there. Our retail REIT bought it, but there was extra land there and decided to make kind of a mixed use community with rental apartments, a grocery store, the Canadian Tire, the LCBO, everything that's there now. So you see that next time you go up north, I guess. All of our communities, we try to have central amenities for the people that live there. Property not hoping to launch next spring. Peterborough, right next to the National Historic Lock, so Lock 21 in Peterborough. Collingwood recently delivered a presentation, 187 rental apartments and some townhomes. We've got this beautiful Guelph project proposing rental apartments. We bought a site in Barrie, just off the 400. It's zoned for 1,000 rental apartments. Those are still in the planning stages. Just more about Skyline. I mean, we are very much focused not only on environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability. We have a number of different outreach programs. I think Jason's probably talked to you a lot about our Tender Relief programs. And more recently, SkyDev's initiative, the apartment REIT decided we kind of spearheaded them donating land to Kindle communities, and I'm donating my time with my team. SkyDev's donating time to get the entitlements and advance approvals for a permanent supportive housing project in Guelph. Some of you may be familiar with Kindle. So we're donating our land to Kindle. I'm donating my time with Kindle. I'll just play a quick clip from a video we created. I'll see if I can share this properly. I won't make it too long, I promise. Just loading.
I hope I don't have to follow this presentation up.
This is just the
Who was that?
introduction.
I'll make sure you do.
It's the introduction still. So can you see my screen here?
Yep.
I got to share sound, I think. Hold on. Share sound. Here we go. Can you hear that?
We got it.
Since 2014, Guelph Wellington has been working to end homelessness by 2023. That goal is doable.
To have the nonprofit sector, healthcare, and the private sector all come together to make this happen is unbelievable.
It's so important for us to build supportive housing in Guelph to ensure that our most vulnerable have a place to call home and to have wraparound support services for them.
We've had buildings and properties in the Onward Willow area for 20 years. Recently, we've been given the opportunity to donate some of our land to Kindle Communities to build permanent supportive housing in our own backyard.
We're proud to lend our expertise to develop permanent supportive housing at Shelldale Crescent in Guelph. Kindle Communities is creating a vibrant and supportive community.
We plan to build permanent supported homes for approximately 30 community members, and we could not be prouder to work with our partners and our community to make this project a reality.
The residents that will live in this permanent supportive housing building will...
But that's okay. That's a good taste of what we're doing here. Now back to the slideshow. Are we back on the slideshow?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm getting better with this stuff. So just a taste of some of the community initiatives we're working on, and really just focus big picture on Ontario's housing crisis. Now this slide's right out of the housing minister's handbook for about 2 years ago. It's gotten worse since then in terms of prices. Probably seen prices even in center of Wellington increasing significantly with a flood of buyers coming out of the GTA looking for more space, less density, more outdoor areas. So 2 years ago, rental prices were already up 10 to 15%. Home sale prices were up almost 10%. I'm sure that's even higher now. Vacancies down big time. Nobody's building new rentals. And I just want to highlight the bottom part of this slide, how long it actually takes to build something in Ontario. Most municipalities, it takes about 2 years to get a site plan approval. If you're also zoning the property, it could be another 2 years, 3 years if you're going to LPAT. So that's 5 to build out these buildings. Like Collingwood, there's a 20-month schedule to build out. Some of those bigger projects could be 3 years. So you're anywhere between 4 to 10 years to build new rental housing and actually get it online. So the more approvals, the more committees, the more review mechanisms you need to go through to get there, the longer it takes to get that online, and the more it adds to the cost of housing. Less than 7% of new housing built over the last 20 years was rental. And I kind of touched on it at the beginning, as we look at providing, we are a for-profit company, Skyline. We look at providing about a 4% return to our investors. But that's over decades. It's not right away. And financially, it makes more sense to sell condos. And it becomes a challenge buying land to make rentals work as well. So why is housing so expensive? Specific to Center Wellington, you've got affluent retirees, commuters, seasonal workers. These are demand pressures. Tourism with the festivals and short-term accommodations, as well as a lot of GTA buyers seeking more space and lower density housing. On the supply side, I mean, there's a very limited supply of entry-level and seasonal housing options. There's no new supply of rental apartments, very limited, if any. And this is true across Ontario. Real public resistance to density and intensification. The pressure of more regulation, policy, and specifically supply side taxation adds to that cost of housing. And the economic incentives to build rental vary from municipality to municipality. And I'll get more into that in a second. And then more recently, just soaring costs of materials, tariffs at the border, fluctuations in construction prices, mostly going up. Give you an idea of what kind of taxes and charges we see on the Kindle project. I mean, that is affordable rentals. It's like $600 a month. You can live there and have all these support services. To give you an idea of the cost per door of municipal fees, I'll go through each municipality and like what they offer. One of the things I'm going to talk about is CIP programs, and in Guelph, in a lot of municipalities, they just say, you know what, you're affordable housing, all these things are waived. But in other municipalities, they create a reserve for these CIP programs, and then it's politically challenging to go and turn around and give that money back to a developer, even though they could have just not taken it in the first place. It's just like, oh, you're going to give that developer a whole bunch of taxpayer money, but in reality, a lot of times we're just asking for our taxes back to not tax the supply of new housing. So here's a kind of a quick snapshot of owners versus renters in Center Wellington versus Ontario. Ontario, generally, there's a rental housing crisis. In Center Wellington, that percentage of renters to owners is even smaller. I'll give you a quick breakdown of what it costs to build housing. About 20, this is not Center Wellington specific, but generally about 25% of new homes is taxed. So if you want to, we'll get into incentives after. When we're operating a building, taxes, property tax and utilities are half the cost of operating it. This is true across the province or across the country, I guess. So incentives in other municipalities, like one of the best tools a municipality has to incentivize specific types of development that they want is the CIP program. I know Center Wellington has a CIP program. Some of it is focused on incentives through the county, and if this committee did want to target a certain type of growth, it could be brownfield redevelopment, could be affordable housing, it could be rental apartments generally, core area business improvements. You can slap it on the whole municipality or just a specific geographic area. And the incentives typically include development charge waivers, planning building fees, cash in lieu of parkland dedication, and property tax incentive programs. I'll just give you a quick snapshot of what each municipality is doing for us. We have in Wellington, they just cut, sorry, not Wellington, near Wellington, in Welland, they just cut the red tape and got us our approvals fast. We still paid development charges. We still made it happen. They didn't charge cash in lieu of parkland dedication, but they did charge the rest of it. In Tecumseh, Ontario, we got a 10-year property tax deferral, no taxes for 10 years on the new product, and then it phases in after. We got planning and building fee reductions and development charge reductions. In Chatham, they have some of the lowest development charges in Ontario. I think it's only $2,000 a unit. They still charge, they still provide half off for rentals, 10-year tax and property tax incentives, as previously described, as well as just capping planning and building fees at $50,000 a building. It's going to take a bit to go through all the projects, but I'll keep going. Gravenhurst, again, just cut red tape, open for business. We're still paying full development charges and taxes, but they're lower there. It was more a function of, as an example, we had a sanitary pumping issue. Well, we told the mayor and the chair of the district, mayor of Gravenhurst, chair of district in Muskoka, and they had it solved in a month. They went to their council and committee, and not only did they get the project on the capital plan, but they paid for it, and they got it done so we could launch our project next month, or this month rather. Peterborough has a CIP program where all rental apartments in a certain geographic area are waived for all development charges. Same thing, brownfield redevelopment, tax incentives. They have an extensive CIP program focused on rental housing. Barrie's more focused on affordable housing, but the common theme here is that each municipality has its own CIP area targeting what they want. I think Guelph might be an example of one of the more broken ones that needs to be fixed. It needs, the council's in the position where they have to fund it all the time instead of just waiving those fees from the onset. And it's politically difficult to collect people's fees and then give it back to them. This bottom line was more for Collingwood that has no CIP program whatsoever, to say, if you want to do this, you can do this. The council does have the authority to waive fees. Wanted to give an example of how density changes the price of housing and the cost of housing. Density is a good thing on a medium scale. When you get to high density, you have a lot more underground parking, so it's not more cost effective. But that medium middle housing, surface parking apartments really is a cost effective option. I just wanted to show you an example from Collingwood where, you know, they had some policy that deducted units per hectare and the available density from road widenings and environmental protection areas that get conveyed. And that's not how their legal documents are written, but that's their internal policy. And I was just highlighting that it's costing $45,000 extra per apartment because of their policies and because of the way they've set it up and how the way they've always done it. So spreading more fixed costs, you see that upfront land cost, the upfront time to get site plan approval, to get zoning approval, spreading it out over more density, it makes it more affordable. So like, I know you said 3 key points, but I've got 4 key takeaways. Be champions of market housing types that provide affordable, attainable options to people, support density, be a champion in the community. I know there's always going to be people against any form of density, and it's not politically easy, but you can do it. Seek out those strategic partnerships, private and nonprofit property owners. Developers want to accomplish your objectives. We want to do good. We want our brand out there to do not only rental housing, but affordable housing in some cases. Mainly, we chose Guelph because it's our hometown, Center Wellington. I know a lot of our partners are there as well that live there. Next point is cutting red tape, being open for business, getting through those planning approvals quickly, and prioritizing files that are meaningful and you want to see happen quickly. And then finally is providing incentives for housing, rental housing, affordable housing, by way of a CIP program. I'm happy to answer any questions everyone has. Quick presentation. If there's a lot of content, I'm happy to get into more details.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a lot of content there. I don't know how you all want to do it, whether we ask questions individually after each presentation or wait until the end. Does anybody have strong feelings one way or the other?
An observation on that. When he was showing the other properties he was developing in other areas, I noticed the heights were a lot more. And in Center Wellington, I think we're just at 3 right now. Maybe that's something we could examine to maybe open up for rental opportunities. Maybe if we could go higher height wise without applying for a variance.
I'll respond to that. I think that from a construction standpoint and efficiency and affordability, height, in terms of Ontario Building Code, kind of caps out about 6 stories to be considered a tall building and require more fire suppression systems, more non-combustible materials. The cost increases beyond 6. So if you're looking at going beyond kind of 4 or 5, the 6 would be like the threshold from a building code standpoint of hitting a tall building.
Okay, that's good information.
I think the context matters too for height and shadows. Like it it shouldn't height for the sake of height. I know it's politically difficult, but it should be more about shadow and impacts than about height.
Okay.
I would just clarify that I think Center Wellington is 4 right now, and we have approval for a 5-story currently, so it's moving in the right direction. But yes, height is always best.
Yeah, most of our buildings are 4 to 5 stories. 6 would be kind of the max in terms of a secondary community where you're not in a downtown setting and you can do a bunch of surface parking and have a bunch of green space. We typically do 4 and 5 stories. Elevator access. We see across the province you have an aging population that is retiring. They don't ever want to go to a nursing home. They want their independence as long as humanly possible. I have 80-year-old relatives that would rent an apartment forever if they could, because they don't want to go to a retirement home or any type of seniors assisted living facility until they absolutely have to. And people are living longer, healthier lives, and rental apartments are a huge demand across the province. So pretty well every one of our buildings are fully accessible for that reason.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the committee for
Yeah,
Greg? Tony.
I have a question, Greg. I'm interested in the surface parking. So are you planning ahead for the day when in the future we're not all driving cars? Are you still planning? I don't know what this industry standard is for number of cars per unit, if it's 1 spot per unit or 2, or what the standard is now. But is there any thought that going forward we maybe don't need so much parking? A lot, because it's so much space it takes up.
There definitely is a thought. I mean, I think in the near term, our focus is more on electrifying those parking spaces. So every single building we have charging stations. We install the we install the capacity to increase our electric charging stations to every single spot. We think that the autonomous vehicle and the electric vehicle are the future. And even though there'll be a lot more car sharing, people will still want to have their own autonomous vehicle that drives them around, and those will need a place to park. You know, you got your car seat or your hockey sticks and you just leave them in the car all the time. Like, I think in the rental communities, there will be a lot more car sharing, but I don't think we're not of the mind that the car is going away, but the parking requirements will reduce over time, I think. On a surface parking lot, it's a bit easier because you can just turn it into green space. And in a parking structure, we try to design kind of higher ceiling heights. Like in the case in Barrie, we have above grade parking, and do that higher flat slab ceiling height so it could one day be converted if it no longer becomes required. So we are mindful of it because we do own our buildings for decades. We're not just selling it. So good question.
Okay, anybody else? I just have one question from an ongoing property management standpoint. Most of what we're looking at here are incentives to construction. So once it's built, once it's up and running, can we understand that it is possible to manage a medium-sized, small apartment building in a profitable way that makes it viable with what we would call attainable rents? So if the rents in that project were capped at the attainable level, which I think here is, I'm just trying to remember now from the study, somewhere around $1,000 a month, I guess. Is it possible for an owner, either individually or through professional help, to manage and make a profit on a building where all or most of the units, the rental was capped at the attainable level as defined?
As defined at 30% of the average income?
Yes, and I think we have a number. We've done the research here. There's a number in Center Wellington that kind of shakes out to. As I say, my memory is it's around $1,000 a month. I'm not sure, but yeah, there's a formula that provides that. So given that, and given that your revenue is kind of capped for that project, because that's what we want to incentivize to get built, can it run viably over a period of time for whether it's an individual landlord or a group of a company like yourselves managing a group of projects?
I guess there's kind of two parts to that answer. One, I guess we're building new rental housing. Oftentimes the people in those existing buildings can afford something a little bit nicer, and it frees up that existing rental stock. We have our average rent across our portfolio is about $1,100 a month across Canada because we have a lot of the older stock. So when we build those new buildings, we find that a lot of our current tenants move there that can afford it, and we're able to rent those older units that have a lower cost base. To answer the question of can new product be built and achieve attainable rents, it is possible, but it requires teamwork with the municipality to reduce that supply side taxation. You have ongoing operational costs on a property tax standpoint that it is like, if you go unit per unit, like apartments pay more than their share, like in terms of density might have 1/10 of the cost of a single family home community because it's spread out. So it's a tax positive situation for a municipality. So it's not politically favorable to tax single family homes their fair share, frankly. So you have all these apartment buildings paying more tax on it. So in working with a developer to do a lower property tax threshold for a community and have that lower operational cost, the answer is all of our costs get passed on to our end users, just like any other business. So the more tax on the supply there is, the more the rent is. The more property tax there is, the more the rent is, the more utilities. So we try to handle utilities by building these sustainable technologies, but to bring it to that next level of attainability and to cap rents, it requires a partnership with a municipality or a two-tier municipality in some cases to do that and keep those rent levels down. So it is possible, but it requires teamwork.
So just, Ron, can I just extrapolate from that? What you're saying is that even if you got all the incentives that we're talking about to construct, you would still need further cooperation or assistance from the municipality on the tax side in order to make these things financially viable over the long term?
Yeah, like operationally, like I have to run the numbers on Center Wellington, but I mean, operationally, generally, the cost of construction and financing, as well as tax and utilities, the operational costs often don't allow rents to be that low on new construction, the upfront costs as well as the ongoing costs. So Skyline's not in the business of building and owning and managing affordable housing. We will build it and find a nonprofit to own and manage it. We have buildings that would have a component of attainable housing, but to just own a portfolio of affordable housing isn't our focus. That said, attainable rents in Center Wellington, I think, are still quite reasonable. So I think it is possible in your community. Okay. If we were in Cornwall, Ontario, I'd probably say no.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Didn't want to monopolize that. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So Greg, you mentioned in your presentation that most of the product that you were building was rental, but yet condo was more profitable. Why did you guys make that decision to go that route?
I mean, I'm integrated in the Skyline group of companies, so I'm providing development management services for each of those REITs. Probably 80% of the projects I showed you are lands already owned by the Skyline Apartment REIT. We call those extra lands unicorn sites because we don't have to pay for the land and we can actually make rental apartments pencil. Collingwood was made possible because we're selling off that townhouse piece to reduce the land cost on the build. We just have a hard time, I mean, an impossible time competing on buying land compared to a condo developer. Why did we do it big picture? We want to grow the apartment REIT and we want to provide rental housing in Ontario for people. There's a big demand and it does provide a modest return over time.
Okay, and then did COVID affect any of the demand rates for like the higher density building sites? Was that ever a concern or a concern going forward?
I think that our existing properties, I think it affected people's willingness to move anywhere. The people were more inclined to stay put and not move. We didn't see a big rise in vacancy. Pretty stable, actually.
Okay.
Not a lot of people looking to move in for a few months, for a good 6 months, because there was a good period where everything just stopped, right? And then all of a sudden everything's hot again. Yeah. Everybody wants to move and go to different densities and whatnot, but most, I'd say we're probably on average like 10 to 15% below market rent, because when a tenant moves to one of our buildings, they're subject to the Residential Tenancies Act and rent control, and you can only increase their rent 2% a year. So if they're there 15, 20 years, they don't want to move because they'll have to pay a lot more rent somewhere else.
Correct. And then just can you give me an example of the rental rates for the Collingwood and say the Chatham properties? Do you have those established yet, or would you know?
I don't have them handy, but I know what they are, rent per square foot. I mean, Collingwood's, there's 0 new rental apartments, and it's a super hot market. And actually, they've thrown down an interim control bylaw where nobody can build anything now.
Yeah, I heard that.
So it's hard to say what it would be, but we model that in about, $230 $250 a square foot in Collingwood. So if you're 500 square feet, you'd be $1,400 a month roughly. Or if you're let's say 1,000 square feet, it could be 2,300 to 2,500 a month for a 3-bedroom. I'm talking about rent per square foot per month. In a place like Chatham with all these incentives and cheaper land, we're closer to $1.70 a month. So that's, on 1,000 square feet, that'd be 1,700. Obviously 500 is half of that. They're not that large. Our apartments are usually 650 square feet to 850 square feet. So let me just give you a quick number here.
Okay.
So you'd be about $1,350 in Chatham for a 2-bedroom. And then in a place like Collingwood, where taxes are through the roof and land prices are super high, it'd be about $1,900 a month.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Brian.
Quick question. Is there an appetite, and any of the other chaps that are here with us today might answer too, for the concept of in a market value building having a certain percentage of the units renting at what would be called quote unquote an attainable rent?
I think 2 parts to that answer. From a social stigma standpoint, mixing in a rental building is easy. People don't mind if someone's paying a bit less rent down the hall. if you're building $1 million condos and you have to do it, it's problematic for a developer. I think you're getting at the tone of inclusionary zoning and those are possibilities in Ontario. What I'd say about inclusionary zoning is you have to be careful not to perpetuate your problem. If you say 10% needs to be affordable in every development and that cost gets passed on to the developer, well, you're making the other 90% of homeowners or renters pay more. You're making it less affordable for everybody else. So as long as that type of policy is backed by strong CIP incentives to make sure that that affordable component doesn't get passed on to the rest of the market, I think it's fair to do. What doesn't work in Vancouver and Richmond and a lot of British Columbia, places where that is the rules, is that the other 90% of the owners or renters are paying for the 10%, and it's just another supply side tax.
I see.
Thanks.
Deanna, yes?
Thanks, Greg. To your point about the challenges with upfront costs and land being one of them, have you ever developed on land that you didn't own? And if not, maybe this is open to everyone else, what are the upfront incentives, or what is the business case? Like, where do things become really challenging with respect to land costs?
Making the rental market work with the land input is the challenge, I guess. Have we ever, I mean, the case of us trying to develop on land we don't own, or I guess we own it now, but a Kindle project would be an example where we're donating it to a nonprofit to own and manage it long term. Generally, we like to have freehold ownership for our rental apartment buildings as part of our portfolio for valuations and everything else. Happy to donate our time to make affordable housing projects happen, but it's not part of our current investment pool at the moment. I guess I'd need to get more specific. Is there
Yeah, no, I was thinking, you had mentioned that the sites that you have where rentals are built, you already own that land. Have there been examples of where you purposely purchased land for rentals?
Yeah, so we bought that site in Collingwood, outside the apartment REIT, because they're not interested in building townhouses. And our group will buy it outside, get the site plan approval, sever off the townhouses and sell that to a townhouse developer and use those proceeds to reduce that upfront land cost to make rental apartments viable. Same thing in Meaford, Ontario. We have a site right on Lake Huron. There's townhomes, a hotel, and some rental apartments. Again, taking that kind of master plan component and getting the value out of those other components to make the apartment land affordable enough to build on. Barrie, Ontario is an example of us buying a site straight up to build for 1,000 rental apartments, and we're only able to make that work because of the upfront price and the density and the CIP programs they have.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on to the other. Oh, all right, I've done maybe a lot of similar questions with the other guests, but I want to give everybody else a fair chance here too. I just do want to say as an aside, that Kindle project is very exciting in Guelph. I used to be on the Kindle board, and I think I left a little bit too early. I'm sorry I missed that one, but it sounds really good. Okay, I'm going to move on. Save your questions. We'll have a lot of similar questions, I think, for everybody. The next person on my screen, lucky person, Taylor.
Before I go, if any of you have a good rental apartment site in Center Wellington, send me a note.
We'll let you know. Taylor.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thanks, Greg. I concur with everything Greg mentioned there, and maybe I'll just fill in a little more information. So 75% of all of the existing rental units in Canada were built prior to 1975. So that's when the last tail end of the baby boomers were entering the workforce and children. and they're coming back. So that's what we're seeing now is demographic shifts for retirees that are looking for rental housing again. Couple that with a positive 300,000 a year net immigration, most of which comes to the GTA and ripples out. We're talking about Center Wellington here today. That has a huge impact on us. So let's immigration alone, without even considering the baby boomers, 300,000, and there were 25,000 apartment units built in Canada in 2019. So what we're talking about here is a supply problem. I'll bluntly answer the question that you put to Greg. Can you build new attainable housing? The answer is no, it's not feasible. The simple math, Greg's numbers were 288,000 a door construction costs, or sorry, 276, mine are 288. I think I need to have that coffee with Greg and see where he's finding that extra savings there. But at a market rent of 600, 800, it's difficult to carry almost 300,000. So a brick costs me the same on a profit basis as it does on a non-profit basis. So that's the reality that we're up against here. So for us, and I'll just talk solely about Center Wellington. There's a universe of about 500 apartment buildings right now, or apartment units in Center Wellington. Supply definitely is the answer here. Incentives are great. I encourage them, but it's not. It's wonderful and it's necessary. But the first step forward is a community mindset, a collective agreement that there is a problem. And I think that's easy individually. That's easy to attain. Everyone I speak to acknowledges that. However, when we come forward with an application, and I'll just say that on a universe of 500 apartments in Center Wellington, we have 250 units either in pre-consult or we have the land tied up and ready to go. So this problem can be solved in 2 years in Center Wellington if the community will is there. What happens is we bring an application forward. The neighbors rightly have concerns about density in their neighborhood. They bring those forward to council, council's divided, and time goes by. So I have one file, it's been a year, and we're still in the pre-consult because I know there's sensitivity on the area. So my suggestion, the very first suggestion would be, make this a very public initiative. Let's ensure that we have counselors, each and every counselor support it. If they don't support it, we don't go forward. It's that simple. Once we have that buy-in, then we look at Center Wellington, take a big pink highlighter, and let's identify areas where this intensification and this growth is acceptable. That sets the threshold politically. It sets it in the community. It sets it for developers. We're all then at the same playing field. We have the same expectations, so that when we bring it forward, we're all on one team going for this goal, and we all have to be reasonable. And that's what I bring to the table. I know that's what Greg would bring to the table. It's what Eric brings, and I know that the community is reasonable too. So this is definitely solvable. So let's just say we bring those 250 units forward. Well, how does that help with attainable housing? Recently, we built 27 units in Fergus. 15% of those units were residents moving, and these are numbers that don't hit the conventional books because they're intercompany transfers. So, and then Greg was alluding that too. When you have some mass in a community, you have people in your buildings that are looking to move up if there is product there, and so 15% of the new residents moved from our existing buildings or other existing buildings in town into that building. So that freed up, if we built these 250 units, that frees up 37 apartment units that, as Greg mentioned, are rented at about half on turnover of what the market rent is. And they hit that attainable number that you're speaking about, Don. So that's where that number can be hit. In addition to that, the remaining 85% of that building, half of the people came in from out of town, which is to be expected. That's the GTA ripple. The other half came from in town. They sold their homes and or are in the process of selling their homes and rented a unit. So then those resale homes go back into the pool, right? And there we have more attainable housing on. So it's supply across the board of every type, and that's how we get by this pinch point. So once we have this community, have everybody coalesce around this idea, and we move forward, then we can start looking at incentives. There's some real low-hanging fruit. A lot of municipalities have adopted the new residential tax class. It's comparable, or it's equal to the residential tax class. I know Guelph has. This is a 10, 15-year-old initiative, so very easy to do. When a new building comes online, they're at the residential tax class, not 3 times higher. That's what Greg was mentioning, the burden that's on multi-res. Another thing is density bonusing. That building I spoke about before, we had approved for 23 units. We were tight on parking. We went back on a variance, had an additional 4 units, committed to rent those units at 80% of the rest of the rents in that building, and did that. So that brought 4 units that otherwise wouldn't have existed into circulation. I'm trying to think of what else we could add here. I have a site in Guelph, and it has been 4 years, and today my building permit, and these are for rental, they're duplexes, so 20 units. This site today, the first permit was refused because they want to collect parkland in lieu on the accessory suite. So we've already paid it on the house, and now they want, and so it contravenes the law. We have to get our lawyers involved. And so here we are 4 years later, and I sat there and I watched council debate spending $540,000 to turn the Parkview Motel into housing, while my application sat there all winter because there was no sod on the boulevard under the snow, so they couldn't register the condo. So it's this mind space of if this is an initiative, then let's do it, and let's do it. We can answer this in 18 months in this community. I'm based in the community. We're committed. We have the sites. We have the people. We're ready to go. We just need approvals. So that's the long and short, and I am a very blunt person. So it's supply. Supply is the answer. So let's not get into the weeds on pages of incentives. Those come long down the line. We just have to have an understanding of where we're going, and get some sites identified, and we can bring it.
All right, thank you. Any questions there? I know, Don, I think I cut you off as we moved between speakers. Did you want to pick something up with Taylor or anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to all the developers that are here. I think it's great, great input at this particular point. And what's the percentage of that we're talking about with Greg? Is there a magic number of attainable housing or affordable housing that can be in an apartment building block? Is there some kind of formula there that?
There's not really, and then again, that's the type of thing where we get into the weeds on this, where what we need is robust supply. So we put 4 units in that 27 unit building. That's fine. It could have been 5. It could have been 2. I think that's more site specific. Again, picking up what Greg said, I already owned the land there. It was heavily paid down, so that's what made that site feasible. So yeah, it's getting approval within the build boundary and the intensification. So I mean, if we could roll out, greenfield sites all day long, I mean, Greg would confer, we could drop 100 units in every small community in Ontario, and they'll absorb them tomorrow. So it's just getting that land is the approvals.
That's great. Thanks.
Can I chime in too?
Yes, please.
Oh, Greg. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I want to echo that. Like, what happens if you add 2,000 new rental units to the supply? that is the attainable future of having just more rental housing available to people. And think about on a very small scale, if I had a little 16-unit building I wanted to put in communities all around Ontario, super cost effective. You can build it in 6 months, 8 months, deliver it to people, but you'll be tied up for 5 years trying to get approval for it, and it's just not viable.
Okay. Did I see Brian? Did you have your hand up? Or you were just scratching your head, one or the other?
I must have been. Thanks.
Anybody else? So I guess my takeaway from Taylor, and I guess is Greg Eck, really your focus is not so much what do we need to do to incentivize attainable rental. You're saying if we just incentivize rental per se, increase the supply of that, sort of the knock-on effect of that will lead you towards more attainable anyway. Is that kind of the gist of it?
Absolutely. And I'll say it's not a knock-on effect. It is the only effect. Like that is the only result with supply and demand, right? So there's no other answer. And I'd even go so far as to put a challenge out there. We have a site right now in Fergus. So I don't know how many units it is. We haven't quantified what the attainable number is. Is it 40? Is it 50? Whatever it is, we can give you that, in 12 months. But we need approvals. So that's the answer.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on? All right. Thanks, Taylor. The next lucky person on my screen is Eric. Welcome. You're on mute, Eric, I think.
How are we now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay.
You moved outside, I think.
I am. I was inside, but everybody's getting grumpy at me, so I came outside. I'm at my cottage.
Perfect.
It is actually great weather. Anyway, I got a couple of ideas. One, and anybody knows me will think I'm absolutely crazy for suggesting this, but to build on what other things have been said already, I think a committee for rental units should be set up so things can be streamlined and prioritized. So you have the people who are able to make the decisions on a committee, a rental project comes forward and they deal with it and move it forward as fast as possible. The 3-4 years it takes to get things going, especially for little fellows like me, it's brutal, to be blunt. Next thing, I think to think outside of the box. I know the 50, 60, 70 unit jobs, 100 job unit buildings are nice, but also a lot of little projects can work. 3 units here, 5 units there. It all adds up. The town just approved 3 units of expansion of one of our buildings. Not much, but it's 3 units. But then let's say on another building, we have 5 units that are ready to go. We were trying to start building last year. And because of a record of site condition, which is kind of questionable whether it's necessary. Well, it's more than questionable. As this building, these 5 units are on the 3rd story of a building. The whole thing, the project dies. And it's 5 units right downtown where we need people. So I think easily said, if we had a committee that streamlines this process to speed it up, incentives, I'm not sure about that, but I definitely agree with the idea that rental taxation should be lower. I'm building 40 units downtown. It's dragging out a little bit now, but I want to build 40 units downtown. I want to build them at $1,200 a unit, all included, utilities, everything. I'll have no problem doing that. The problem is the time to get it going. I'm ready to go. And the other thing is the taxation on it. I just discovered that I'm going to have to add $75 a month to my units simply because of the residential tax I'm going to be paying on it. Tennessee should have a different taxation. I agree with the other comments that a house for $4,000 or $5,000 is not indicative of what it costs to have that house. And to pay $1,600, $1,700 on a rental unit is not indicative of what it costs the township to have that rental unit. That's about it. Everybody else already said everything I was about to. I was going to talk for half an hour, but I don't have to no more. So there you go.
Lucky you. Okay. Thank you so much. Anybody have questions for Eric? Or we want to get an answer for a question that's already been asked? You want to get an answer from him? Just as good. All right. Seeing none. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. The last, but certainly not least on my screen, Dave.
Hi, guys. Everything, I really like Taylor's point about really try to pick out areas in town and maybe say, hey, in this area, we can go high density. So that way, when you're putting your money and efforts towards it, you know what you're going to get at the end of it. So just to increase some more C1 zonings in town. Other than that, I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Any additional questions for any of our guests?
I would just add that the Township of Center Wellington has been super supportive of intensification. I think we've added about 75 just accessory suites in town in the last 8 years. And all legal and top notch, but the other municipalities, it's been a tough go. So I just want to thank the staff too. Like this is a wonderful township to work in, compared to other places we worked in. So I just want to put that out there as well. Like that does not go unnoticed, and that will bring development as well. The people that we work with in town.
Thank you. That's very good to hear. Did I see a hand up? Mariana, how are you this morning?
Thanks. Good. Thank you. So I just want to ask a question of Dave and maybe the others as well. When you say increase C1 zoning or areas in town, are you speaking strictly for residential only, or are you talking about mixed use? Because the C1 is really commercial at grade, residential above, and in specific areas in Fergus that are not on the main street, we allow full residential development, as you know, which is what you've done on St. Patrick's Street. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the case in Elora right now. So are you looking at more of a mixed use model, or are you looking at strictly residential? Just to help us understand.
I would say mixed use too. Like, you and I have sat down and we've looked at potential developments in town. And I think maybe if we sat down as a group and said, hey, this area would be good for changing the zoning on, and even to be more specific with some places having a higher density. So, a place like, take example for up across from the physiotherapy place in Elora, Hilltop there. Like there's a nice little corner up there, maybe if the township sat down and said, hey, we could offer this and really attract like some like Taylor, Skyline, or myself to put a bid on it if you knew what you could get out of it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand whether the developers are looking at a mixed use model and encouraging sort of, because that's what we're trying to do, obviously, is to encourage the mixed use so that people do have the retail and the service commercial close by, but trying to understand whether that's a viable model for you.
Yeah, I just put like the C1 would be fine with me with mixed use. I just put up a place down on Geddes for a commercial property. I had 4 people applying for it. So yeah, I would have no problem putting some, excuse me, and have no problem putting my money into a mixed use building.
The C1 zoning is just a little bit easier because the parking requirements are lower. Mm-hmm. And when you have commercial at grade.
I know for myself personally that the project that I'm trying to do downtown is mixed use, and I've got half a dozen really quality tenants looking for the commercial side because of the residential above it. Mm. So I like that.
I think with those downtown properties, mixed use, having retail and residential above it is a great solution to get moderate infill of rental housing. But on a bigger the challenge is those smaller properties, they're smaller investors, they're smaller developers. We don't do a project less than 50 units as an example, because we just can't get the scale of the cost of those approvals. Those smaller infill projects really need champions to cut that red tape and make it happen quickly.
Absolutely.
All right. David Taylor.
Just one other comment too. Like I think these, like anywhere we can get supply, like in the downtown core, that's great. But also if we're looking at expanding build boundaries or you know, in the same way that the municipalities often provide zoned or serviced industrial land. I mean, we could look at that for multi-res too, that, hey, if you're going to bring in 50 acres into the build boundary or whatever, then let's have 20 of that set aside, and, you know, for 200 or 300 rental units, much in the same way as you would industrial land, and then auction that off. So that's a thought too, a little more future. Like, it seems we're always trying to jam these in on the back end, you know, get them into existing sites or downtown cores, you know, a little more thought on the front end would be good.
Okay, any other questions for any of our guests this morning? Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Don. For all of the C1 zonings, for all developers here, you're talking about doing these downtown projects. How has the heritage requirements affected those developments? Are they a hindrance, or are they able to be worked around? What is your thoughts on those?
Derek?
Well, with the building I'm doing downtown, Heritage came in and all of a sudden made us move back the building 12 feet, which none of the rest of the downtown core is like that. I think it's a hindrance. I really do. I don't know why Heritage has so much control over the initial design of buildings. Yeah, we're losing a couple parking spaces. We're losing a couple of units to do a model that doesn't even conform with the downtown core, and it's because of Heritage suggestions. So I was a bit disappointed with them.
Okay, anybody else want to take that on?
We've always found Heritage to be a great thing. I mean, the rentability of it anyways. I mean, there's an old barn behind one of our sites in Fergus there, the old Heritage Square, that will convert into lofts. I mean, it's a great feature if you can work it in. But I do agree with Eric. It comes with its own, you know, unique hurdles. Luckily, we generally know those going into it. So, you know, when you're approaching a site, but I mean, I love Heritage. We live in a Heritage house. Our office is Heritage. I mean, it's excellent and desirable for sure.
Garrett, you want to respond?
Yeah, let me fulfill my reiterate a little bit. I love Heritage, and I have a lot of Heritage buildings that I've done exactly how Heritage wants it. I'm talking about new builds where all of a sudden Heritage is looking for an aspect to the building that doesn't necessarily fit with modern day standards. But for like the market and the old swim pool and everything else like that, love Heritage and maintain that, no problem whatsoever. It's just the new builds. I'm questioning the amount of involvement they have.
I'd like to speak generally to Heritage. I'm not as familiar with Center Wellington's Heritage districts, but I think Heritage is an important part of the vibrancy of a community. That said, the more hurdles or challenges to get through, the more it costs, the longer it takes. If they could just do it in a quick manner, it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, we've got archaeological considerations, environmental considerations. Are there species at risk? Is there heritage? I could tell you 20 different things that are roadblocks to development now, and heritage is important, but it'd be great if they could move through those files fast.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Tony?
I just have one question to follow up on the heritage question. I'm thinking about our what's it called? Urban design guidelines, where we've sort of laid out the vision of what we want our communities to look like in terms of trees and aesthetics and so on. Is that a hindrance at all when you're talking about going into the downtown properties, or frankly, developing anywhere, looking at those?
Who wants to take that on? Eric?
Not at all. In fact, the building I'm trying to do downtown is going to have a full rooftop terrace with all sorts of green space, trees, everything. Glass elevator going up to it so that the public can access it. I think it's very important to have a lot of trees and landscaping on the site, as much as possible for seating, for anything, to make use of the Grand River. If you have a Grand River property, to make sure there's seating there, to develop all them areas. Absolutely. I think trees and green space is very, very important. Even if you look at a little small thing where Michael Chong is now in the old pool, we made half of that site into green space and seating. It's just, I think that's very important for a downtown.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else about the urban design guidelines?
I think Center Wellington has that balanced. I think you've hit that one right. Like anything else, in moderation, it's great. Again, in Guelph, they want full renderings of the exterior, and I mean, thousands of dollars. You haven't even sold the house. You don't even know what you're building there, but yet you've got to put all this package together, and it's nonsense. It's a waste of time, and it costs money. So I think Center Wellington, you've hit the nail on that one. It's always, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for any of the gentlemen? Kelly.
I have a magic wand here, and I want to give each of the four guests. Yeah, I do, Don. I want to give a wish to each of the four guests. If you could change one thing, and we could take action in one area, as a township, to encourage you to build more rentals and increase the supply, one thing, what would it be?
Who wants to go first? Taylor.
I'll gladly take that one. I would love to have all sitting councilors express or acknowledge that attainable housing is an issue, and that they will support going forward intensification that is reasonable, and that they will assist to help the public understand that this is a common problem, and I think that'll go a long way to saving the councilors' grief. It'll go a long way to have some community understanding that we all need this. Not my backyard is as live as ever. I try to lead by example. We put 40 units in my backyard, and it's wonderful. So it has to happen in a respectful way. But I think we need to understand that would be my ask, is that we just have a community awareness that we have a shortfall, and we need to address it.
Okay. Eric, did I see your hand?
Streamline the process, speed it up, maybe a special committee to get these things moving, so it's not 3 or 4 years, but it's 6 months before approvals. Like, there should be no reason why in a small town like us we can't have approvals in 6 months.
Okay, thank you. Dave.
I would say increase in the number of units you can have on a lot. So increase in density. Maybe if that's going higher in town.
Okay, Greg.
I guess I would say to put a priority on rental apartments generally by mandating timelines of review and response. I'd love to say it takes 6 months to get a site plan approval, but there is time that the developers need to engineer it, to check geotechnical considerations and servicing and all the technical aspects of a site, and actually design it and approve it. So there's some timeline on our side as well. But maybe just having a timeline that staff stick to, and they have to respond within a certain amount of time. I've got municipalities that take 4 months to get comments on a submission, and it's not great.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Taylor, one more time.
Sorry.
Last
Yeah,
word.
I'm sorry, just one more comment. I also noticed in speaking with both Brett and Mariana that there are some parts of the multi-res zoning that we both acknowledge have come from, you know, Kitchener here or there, and it came over and it wasn't a problem because no one was building it for 40 years, right? But now people are building it, and so there are pieces in that we both parties know are dated and need to change. Parking, density. So why not go through there very quickly? Let's just make those changes so that we're not rehashing them at every hearing. That, you know, let's just raise the bar, because now people are building them. Things have changed, and if we want to build more of it, clarity on any level and transparency anywhere you can get it only helps.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. On behalf of all of us, this has been a really good session, and I think we've all learned a lot on this. I know, speaking for myself, it kind of changes my take in the sense that we've been focusing on upfront incentives for construction. And what I've heard today is of equal or perhaps even greater importance is sort of just the whole issue of the approval process and the time it takes, and the whole issue of perhaps ongoing costs in terms of taxation. So it certainly makes us maybe reevaluate some of the programs and steps that we may end up taking for real incentives. So that was very interesting for me, and I thank you all for that. In terms of the public, that Taylor has been saying, this is a public process. I hope you've been streamed out there today, and people do watch, and the media is watching. And I would suggest to you that this issue is gaining traction as we go. So I think there is some public transparency about this that, as you say, is a very good thing. So anyway, again, thank you all very much on behalf of all of us. And we will press on with the rest of the meeting. You may or may not want to stay with us, but again, much obliged. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. All right. Next on our agenda is the reports from the subcommittees. Just trying to say which one goes first here. Who wants to go first? I don't even have my agenda in front of me. Policy and zoning, how's that? Report from the subcommittee. Who wants to do that? Mariana?
Sorry, thanks. Sure, I can do that. Am I still muted there? It's telling me I am.
No, you're good.
No. Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so we had a good meeting last time, and basically discussed a lot of what we're discussing today with the developers, and wanted to get them in so that we could better understand the actual barriers that we're facing. And we had a good discussion today about some parking issues, increasing density, increasing height. So I think we have a better sense now of that. Kelly did we sent around a survey that we thought would be very helpful as well to get the committee's input on guiding principles going forward. What are the non-negotiables? What are the things that are really valued in the community? And what are the things that we feel need to change so that could help frame our discussions moving forward? And lastly, we were working with Michael on a map. So we're gonna start that in a little more earnest shortly, just because of some time off last week. But we're preparing a map of intensification areas, as was suggested by some of the developers as well, to really hone in on where the potential exists to have increased supply and a little bit more easily, and then come back to this group to bring some of that information forward. So we are working on some of those matters. And I think the discussion today has really helped us a lot to fine tune some of those matters that we're going to want to take forward. I'm not sure if Brett or Kelly have anything to add to that, or Michael.
I'll just add a little bit, Mariana, to the survey that I sent out. And one of the things that that came out when we were having our discussion is we really haven't asked members of the committee what what is non-negotiable when it comes to what we want this town to feel like. And we talk a lot about small town feel, and we want to give all the members of the committee an opportunity to help us to get a better sense of what that means, because we don't want to go too far down the path of attainable housing and where that is best located in Center Wellington if we don't have a sense of what our foundation is. And so if you guys could just fill that out, it would take about 2 minutes. Don't be too hard about it. First impressions is great. What about this community do you love, and where do you see the challenges for Center Wellington? Send that through and we'll share it with the whole group, because I think it is important that we, in the back of our minds, I don't think we have to define it to a great level of detail, but we have to have a better sense of what characteristics we think are absolutely necessary in this community. So we're making sure that we build a town that in 10, 20 years we can all be proud of. And so we have to just be a little bit deliberate about identifying what those characteristics are. And then on the other side, when we're biking around or walking around or driving around this community, what do we really not like? And what do we really make sure that we're addressing when we're talking about healthy growth? And because I think those sorts of things are going to help us. So if you can fill that out, and we'll I did it as well, and it took me probably about 30 seconds. And just as long as for us as a committee, as we go down this, to get a sense of making sure that we're covering off some of the things that sometimes we don't make deliberate and sometimes we don't make explicit. These are the sorts of characteristics we want to make sure that we are protecting in this community. So I think that's good. It's a little bit of foundation work. We probably should have done it in the first meeting that we had with healthy growth, and I think it will help us out going forward.
Okay. Anything else from policy and zoning? No. All right, finance, Brett.
Thank you, Don. So we had our meeting just last week, our second meeting, I guess, and we discussed the town of Belleville, or the city of Belleville's CIP that they've done for housing. We went through that document and we identified in the CIP in Belleville, they've identified a total of 17 or 18 different programs that they offer that all are associated with incentivizing the construction of affordable or rental housing. And so we went through each one of those programs and we made a commentary as to which ones that we thought were suitable or usable for Center Wellington. Some we thought overlapped with things that we've already got in place or were not a township issue. And so we've done that first screening, and we'll work more in our future meetings on some of those individual programs, what they might look like, how they could be financed. It was good to get the feedback from some of the builders today on incentives, and we heard some different messages. I think that from Skyline's point of view, if you're going to build a large project, then you need larger incentives, I guess, in some way of waiving fees and whatnot. The other one that came up today a little bit, and I think we can do a little more research on, is the tax issue on rental housing. And my understanding from a little bit of research that I've done is that once you have 7 or more units in a building, then the tax category for multi-res housing becomes punitive in terms of that it's that much higher than a comparable single detached or even a condominium dwelling. So that might explain why we see more interest in people building condominium apartment buildings, even if they may end up being rental. That may have a bearing on the tax burden. So that's something in the future we can look at. There's an organization called the Fair Rental Housing Policy Association that is an association of the large rental housing providers. And they've done a fair bit of research into this tax issue that we can bring forward. And I think Greg mentioned that the city of Guelph has done it in terms of adjusting their tax ratio. So we'll have to see where we stand. Probably not enough rental housing in the county of Wellington for it to have come up here yet, but that's something we can look into. Certainly seem to play a role in the long-term viability of those rental buildings.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for either Marianne or Brett? Nico.
If you adjust the tax ratio, where do you recover that? How do you recover that? Or is it just written off? I'm just not sure how that all works. Could you let me know how that works?
Well, we haven't gone enough into it to know. I'm assuming that there's a shifting somewhere else into the tax base, but we've only done a little bit of background research so far.
Okay, good question. There's always a cost. Anybody else? Andy, hi.
Hey, Don. Thanks. Just taking that question a little further, as we talked about previously at our subcommittee, in regards to development charges, if we do not collect from one source, we do have to pay for that through another source. So development charges do not give us the ability. So that is a discussion we'll have to review if we do go down the road about development charges. But Brett's correct. That's something that we, for the tax component, we would have to have discussions with the county and how that is filtered through.
Okay. Don.
Who sets the tax rates? Is it county or township or province?
The county sets the tax rate.
Kathy.
With the increase in prices of houses that have gone up so exponentially in the last year or year and a half because of people moving in and buying the housing stock here, how is that going to affect taxes? Is that, because I understand that MPAC sort of does some work in this area, but are taxes going to escalate the same way that the housing prices have? Because I understand it's all based on averages.
Andy?
Yeah, I'll try to take an attempt. I'm not a tax expert, but yeah, MPAC through the province sets the value of house, and typically it's on a market value. The province has, through MPAC, delayed their next round of reviewing that market value of a house. I think that right now we're at a 2016 or 2017 rate. It's about every 4 years. Due to COVID, they have delayed they were going to review a part of all homes across Ontario starting in 2020. They delayed that in 2020 and again delayed that in 2021. My understanding through Dan's explanation to a question of this at council meetings and during budget is that typically what happens, there are a number of houses that go up in value, and there are a number of houses that also decline in value just due to various different circumstances. So there is a bit of balancing to that. So not all properties are going up, but we could ask Dan to give a better answer to that and provide it back to the community.
All right, thank you. I think that would be interesting to know, given the huge increase in market value. You have to assume that market value assessment generally is going to rise even across the board, even though there may be individual variations. And that may be news to a lot of people who are exulting in the value of their property right now when the tax bill comes due, but that all remains to be seen. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Kelly for arranging that. That was a great session with those guys. They were all excellent and they made excellent points. And again, as I say, speaking for me, it gives us a lot more, I think, to think about than maybe we anticipated at the get-go. So thank you for that. Thank you all for your questions. And are we decided, I should ask before we go, are we decided to have a meeting in July? I know we had originally suggested that perhaps because of the subcommittees, we might not have full committee meetings in July and August, but it seems like the subcommittees are actually working through things. Is there going to be anything coming to the full committee that might require some kind of confirmation or decision in the summer that we should continue to have our meetings? Or should we just leave them open? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Mariana.
Oh, I was just going to suggest it might be good to leave it in the calendar just in case it's required. And then I anticipate probably the subcommittees are going to be doing a lot more work over the next month. So maybe if it's not required and there's no actual recommendations coming to this committee for approval or endorsement, then we could maybe cancel the meeting closer to the meeting. That's just my suggestion.
Good idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. When is there a date set for the July meeting? Do we know, Devlin?
It would be the 8th, I think.
Yeah, just looking here, it would be the first Wednesday. So that'd actually be the 7th, I believe.
7th, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
All right, so July 7th, it'll stay on the books, and we'll make a decision, I guess, maybe after the next round of subcommittee meetings as to whether or not anything concrete would be coming forward to the committee. And if there wasn't,
I'd say probably by a week before the meeting, we would probably confirm whether it could be canceled.
okay. So that all depends on the subcommittee. This is what, yeah. Okay, or unless we do something again like we did today and figure that maybe someone else should appear that hasn't appeared. That was fascinating and really good. And if that happens, that's a good reason to have a meeting. But if it doesn't, we'll wait and see what the subcommittees do, and then we'll circulate something around a week or so prior to July the 7th.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we good with all that?
Yep. Just a quick one. Can you remind me when the subcommittee meetings are? Did we set dates? Because I don't think I have them in my calendar.
Yeah, so they're generally, the policy committee meets the third, is it Tuesday or third Thursday of the month? And then the financial is the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Okay, super, thanks.
Yeah, and that was altered for Kelly's benefit, I think. Okay. Thanks all. That was a great meeting. Really appreciate it. Again, thanks, Kelly. And we may or may not see you in July, but we'll see you at the subcommittees.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, everyone. That was a good meeting.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Don. See you, everyone.
Okay.